We'll be looking at ways in which literacy and numeracy may contribute to the development or enhancement of all these aspects of empowerment. At the same time, however, let us bear in mind that although the acquisition of literacy has enabling and empowering effects, it is not always emancipating. I recall the police chief of one of the Nigerian states who was very eager to have his wives learn to read in Hausa so that they could deal with household chores and take messages. But when I suggested that they might like to go on to learn to speak and read English, the official language of his government, in which he himself transacted all his official work, he was horrified, saying that the women would then become troublesome. Literacy in Hausa could be seen in that context as education for domestication, in Frere's phrase, while literacy in the official language might be authentically empowering, since it could, in Brack's terms, enable them to engage effectively in the public sphere. This isn't the place to discuss the very many complicated issues around language in literacy learning, but we should recognize that people who have no access to the language of state business will remain at a disadvantage. With that background of understandings about literacy and about empowerment, let's move to practical illustration. I have 3 stories. A few years ago, I visited a part of Uganda where there was endemic unrest and a low-grade civil war. During wet weather, on a hillside above a valley where bandits were known to lurk, a group of poor widows met to learn to read. There were no chairs, so we crouched on the ground, and the women were too poor to be able to buy paper or pencils. They were learning to write with twigs in the mud. My first reaction was, as I expect yours would be, that this wasn't a very helpful exercise. But I then stood up and went to look at what they had done. I went to one woman and read out what she had written. Her name, Lucy. It was one of the most extraordinary experiences I have ever had to see the burst of joy on her face, that I could read what she had written, that I had deciphered, and by deciphering, confirmed her identity. The same happened with the others. Just that fragment of literacy gave them a sense of recognition by another, even by a foreigner, that was a first step to empowerment. On another occasion, I attended the closing session of a literacy class in Pakistan. I asked through their instructor why the women had come to the class and received several answers, such as, "I can now get respect from my husband," and "I won't now be laughed at by my children." At last, an older woman with a wrinkled face, expressive of a hard life, stood up and said, "I have learnt to read so that I can respect myself." It was interesting that the eldest among the learners gave this very thoughtful answer. She saw that literacy had given her a new kind of confidence, and almost all case studies of literacy learning by both women and men describe the accession of greater confidence as one of the immediate outcomes of literacy learning by adults. Mind you, there may be breaks on that confidence later, and I remember talking to a British woman of Asian origin in the city of Coventry after she had finished her initial literacy course. She said with great perception, "I know that tomorrow I may face setbacks, but I know that today I have done something great, and I feel great, and no one can take that away from me." A third example comes from South Africa. A housemaid in her mid-50s in a rural area had been sent to literacy class by her employer so that she could read recipes for cooking and take down messages from the telephone. A few months after she had finished her course and was using her skills in the house, she simply took these for granted. What was important to her was that she had now been able to send a Christmas card to her son in the city. She told me, "For the first time in my life, I could send my son a greetings card. I wrote, 'Happy Christmas, I love you.'" Here is somebody who subconsciously dismissed her skills at the service of an employer, since these were about making her more useful to someone else. What was important to her was that she now had a chance to strengthen her family relationships and to empower herself in the family. These three examples all indicate that even very basic literacy can lead to basic forms of empowerment, namely a sense of identity, self-respect, and a new view of family position. Altogether, they are, as said, about confidence. Without some form of confidence, persons cannot do justice to themselves or their communities. They're without the sense of security and capacity to have a vision of the future, which Brack gives as a first element of empowerment. Now, it may be objected that in past times there were societies in which many non-literate people were very self-confident and indeed regarded the few literate people as their servants. In those conditions of restricted literacy, the non-literate had the power. In modern times, however, society and the economy are organized by the literate, and that leads to a situation like that of young Jamila and her father, in which the non-literate are the disadvantaged. This is not to say, even faced with the difficulties posed by present-day conditions, that non-literate people are not resourceful and creative. They would not survive if they were not resourceful and creative. But literacy in modern circumstances does, as our Senegalese woman explained, change a person's world, and the gaining of confidence to face that world is part of an empowerment process. In some research I undertook a while ago, I was struck by the number of observers who reported a change in the attitude and actions of new literate women in the household. Ministry of Education officials in Nepal said that women who learnt to read looked after their households properly and kept their houses clean. There have been many studies showing that where a woman is literate, the incidence of child mortality is less, even in places where health provision is limited. And as Mrs. Bush said this morning, the World Bank has reported that the children of better educated mothers, other things being equal, tend to be healthier. I came across a remarkable story in South Africa. Alexandria Hospital near Johannesburg embarked on an infant immunization campaign. But few women brought their children in. Encouraged by Sister Elizabeth, who came from the township, the authorities diverted their immunization campaign budget to a literacy program. In the aftermath, many more mothers came forward, and the immunization campaign became a success. In one sense, such stories show women as instruments of change rather than as initiating agents of change. But the essential point is that these women took their own decisions about new cleanliness and about approaching the immunization clinic. The confidence given by literacy, as well as the opportunity to understand what the reasons were for home cleanliness or for immunization, signalized new literate women's greater readiness to take decisions of many kinds in the household and in the family environment. In an action research project by Mrs. Martha George of Nigeria in a peri-urban Lagos slum, the women themselves reported that as the program moved on, their relationship with their male partners had changed, so that they, the women, felt ready to share in a much greater range of decisions. One of those crucial decisions is about whom in the family goes to school. In a wide variety of countries, reports show newly literate women insisting that their younger sisters or their daughters should go to school as well as their sons. And in some cases, they intervene in other families as well. One of the major effects of girls going to school, which is immediately perceived by literate women, is that they're protected from very early marriage and very early childbearing. Non-educational, but very important results. Decisions of this kind in a family lead to significant change in some arenas, but there are changes that can only be brought about when there are changes in the wider society. For instance, about bride wealth or female genital mutilation, FGM. To work for such changes, women need to have a chance to get out of the domestic arena, the household and the homestead, and engage with other people, both men and women, as Brack says, to participate in non-family arenas.